Hey minions, welcome to Crank It Up. I'm Jim Price, and on this episode of Action Awareness, I'm going to be talking about terraforming of the aliens. This was one of the first actions I thought of when I designed this series, and not just because aliens is alphabetically the first faction. No, I consider terraforming to be the single most powerful card in the game, and I always knew I'd do an episode on it. It was just a question of when. I recently played a game where I played terraforming twice in the first 5 turns, with a chance to retrieve it a third time had my opponent not respectfully resigned. So now seems like the right time to talk about this card. This video will be in 3 parts. First, I'll talk about what the card does and why it's overpowered. Second, I'll talk about what I think the card could do to fix this discrepancy in power. Finally, I'll talk about how to combat against it, because it's definitely necessary. Terraforming allows you to search the base deck for any base and swap it with the base in play. The minions remain, but the actions on the base do not. The old base is shuffled into the base deck, and you may play an extra minion on the base. To appreciate terraforming's power, you need to understand a bit about bases. Bases vary in breakpoint and power distribution, but there are patterns. As of that 70s expansion, almost every base has first place being equal to or greater than second place by 1 or 2 points. The only exceptions are the ninja style bases I keep mentioning, with the exception of other bases that have special scoring altogether. With the exception of ninja bases and Critter Combat Club, third place is equal to second place or 1 less point than it. Depending on how many points first place is worth, there is a general ceiling and floor to the breakpoint. Why does this matter? Because it makes it easy to predict that there is some base in the base deck that has the breakpoint and the power distribution you are looking for, even if you don't know what that base is. When the core set came out, there were 16 bases. Given how often I play the Smash Up app, which includes the 2 geek bases, I can safely say that there is enough variety in the core set alone to make terraforming extremely powerful. But we have over 10 expansions, and the base rule states to include the bases from all sets featured. This can be as high as 64 in a 4-player game with 8 factions from 8 different sets, or even more if you are playing with 1 faction from the core set or the Munchkin faction. You are guaranteed to find at least some base that meets what you are looking for unless the base has already been used. Expecting a significant power boost? Play Factory 436, 1337 and rack up VPs while your opponent gets very little. Have a ton of lower powered minions to play? Grab the homeworld. Have a ton of minions on the homeworld? Grab Rhodes Plaza Mall. Need a base with a low breakpoint but high victory point output that you can break by yourself? Go for Tar Pits. Are you losing on a base, perhaps significantly? Swap it out for Ninja Doju or Temple of Goju. Even Jungle Oasis has plenty of fun use cases. With terraforming, the extra minion is always icing on the cake, usually to provide that final power needed to break the base. Sometimes, playing terraforming is merely about disrupting other players' plans. Terraforming's true power is that it is a massive power swing. It can be used to score unanswered points, since you can play 2 minions and grab low-hanging fruit to finish off a base you started. Even getting only 3 points by yourself is preferable to giving your opponents any. When you are losing on a base, which can give your opponents 2 more points than you can swap it for a base you can win now with the same distribution, creating a 4-point swing. Worst case scenario, you can trade it for a base with a linear distribution that has a strong runner-up ability. It's fairly common to let players build up on power only for you to terraform it and screw up their plans. You just have so many options, and if I know Winter Squashed is in the deck, you better believe I'm grabbing that when I'm losing on a base. If you play the Leprechaun on a base, I am definitely swapping that base for Cave of Shinies and will proceed to throw all my minions into VP points. The more bases that Smash Up introduces, the more powerful terraforming becomes. Even at 24 bases, an appropriately sized deck, you are bound to have a favorable outcome at any point in the game. Terraforming can even be used to get rid of a base with a particularly troubling ability that your opponent is farming. It can shred actions on a base, greatly hurting steampunks, dragons, truckers, and especially kaiju. Terraforming can also remove a Titan from play because the base leaves play. Imagine what this does to the Cream Puff Man. A player plays all of their cards to get the Titan out, and next turn it's gone. Think about it. There are very few cards that can affect Titans, and one of them was already the most powerful card in the game. That's insane. I could provide example after example of how powerful this card is, but I think you get the point. I also think it's extremely misworded, which hides the fact that it's so powerful because discarding really cannot be prevented. So how do we fix this card? Do we need to fix it? I would argue yes, we do, and I thought a lot about what needs to be done to this card, if we can do anything at all. As I mentioned before, the extra minion isn't really the problem, and removing it does not solve the core issue of it being a game changer. When I think about terraforming as a concept, there is always some semblance of the original planet left, and I wondered if there could be a restriction on what bases you can grab. If you were following the set rule, perhaps you could only grab a base from the same set. While it is theoretically possible to run out of options, I don't see this as very likely. But the problem is that the core set still has the variety you need to be overpowered. Maybe there's a limit on how much the breakpoint can change, so that you can't change a big base into Jungle Oasis. But breakpoint comparisons are seldomly used in Smash Up and might be too hard to predict what you want without some expert knowledge of the bases. Instead of all of this, I think the simplest solution is to restrict the scope of bases from which you can choose to the top X bases. This means that you have a choice of bases, but aren't limited to the top card. However, you're not guaranteed to get exactly what you want, making it powerful, but not overpowered. So what should X be? The School of Wizardry looks at 3 bases, but I actually think it should be 5. Unless you are revealing cards until a specific condition is met, I believe the most cards you ever reveal at a single time is 5, making it a good precedent for terraforming. It's okay for terraforming to be powerful, you just can't have it be overpowered, and I think this reduction brings it back down to earth. Again, Eric, that's not a pun, just a common expression. The rest of the card can be left as is, but hopefully the wording would be cleaned up. In its current form, Alien players can expect to wait for the right opportunity to play terraforming and waste so many good cards of their opponents. It happens every game. But since Smash Up is unlikely to depower the card, how would you combat it? The obvious way seems to be Will Wheaton and Force of Will, but these may not work. First, you can probe for Will Wheaton to discard him, or play Will Wheaton to avoid being probed. For the second point, I want to make a baseball analogy. The closer of a team is typically the best reliever who is saved for the 9th inning to finish the game when you had a tight lead. But as many baseball fans know, sometimes the lead is lost before then and your closer is never used. You might be saving them for an opportunity that never happens. You still have abduction and crop circles to deal with, and these might change the course of the game in their own right. Even the threat of terraforming is powerful against the geeks because it forces them to let other powerful cards pass through. Or you can bait them into playing their counters early, hoping that you never draw terraforming, so you cannot rely on the geek counters. Instead, I found the best way to fight against terraforming is to know what it is capable of and how it is used, then do everything you can to make sure that those no-brainer scenarios never happen. Play a minion on every base. If they want to grab Jungle Oasis for an easy 2 points, this might be a moral victory. Avoid piling on power on a single base because it makes for an obvious ninja-based terraform. If you see that they are piling on minions for a Rhodes Plaza Mall play, finish the base off even if you have to take less points to do so. Your opponent might be minion-starved as a result, hoping to have gained a lot of VP. Don't be afraid to bait terraforming by sacrificing your on-base actions that are particularly powerful because their best card is much better than your best card. I'll take that trade any day if I am playing against aliens. If you can focus on big drops, the aliens have no specials before a base scores and won't be able to counter it. If all else fails, make them use terraforming right away so that the threat of the card is no longer lurking in the shadows. The other way to fight terraforming, if you have the right faction, is to use specials effectively. This may mean holding on to those cards for an eventual terraforming, which may create the closer problem, but it can work. Knowing that the aliens have no specials, if they do play terraforming, your special may be able to trump their best card if you seize the opportunity. A card like Someday My Prince Will Come works great in all cases. If they grab a ninja base, perhaps you can move your biggest minion off of it to knock you down to second place. Otherwise, knock one of their minions off. If you spread your minions out correctly, Full Sail can also coalesce them onto the new base or move them off of the ninja base. Take that, players who don't believe Smash Up is a game about drafting counter factions. Terraforming is a card you have to take seriously. Even the threat of this card is very powerful. I remember winning a tournament game because I terraformed a Jammed Signal Road Plaza Mall into Jungle Oasis. Jammed Signal gave me time to get a minion on the base one turn, while disincentivizing anyone to play a minion there to finish the base. Then, the next turn I played Terraforming to get Jungle Oasis and play enough minions to win the base, getting 2 points while everyone else got none for all of their minions when they were expecting to get 3 or 4. If you give this card to a ruthless player like me, you have to expect the worst possible outcome for you, and using that predictability can be an advantage. There are ways to combat the card, but I still think it needs to be reduced in power to balance aliens, which might be the strongest faction overall. I took them number 1 overall in a 15-round draft, and I have no regrets about doing so, because at the end of the day, I want terraforming in my hand, and it was key to that tournament victory. Do you think terraforming is the most powerful card in the game? If you disagree, let me know in the comments and be prepared for an extended argument you may regret starting. That's it for this week. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe. Let's shut it down.